I wanted to make this video for a few months now. It's along the topic of domestic abuse. I was in a abusive relationship for 2 years, and I wanted to make this video to maybe help others out there who are also in abusive relationships that don't know, in the same way that I didn't know, and identify some of the characteristics of what an abusive relationship is, so that it can help them. I didn't know. Basically, my abuser was my ex-girlfriend, my previous girlfriend. I had no idea what abusive relationship was before I met her. I had no idea what an abusive relationship was while I was in that relationship with her, and I also didn't know that I was in an abusive relationship or what it was even a few days after. It was only once I started looking and reading about breakup and sort of investigating that I came across it and realised that that was what I had. You see, when I heard of from what I understood about abuse, it was usually men against women, usually physical violence. I understand there might be controlling behaviour, but I never really understood or thought that it would happen from women against men. And even when it was pointed out to me by my own family, that not being able to fully speak to them, if that happened to my sister with their partner, that would be really abusive. But yeah, when it happened to me, and it was pointed out to me, I just thought it wasn't that, because I felt like I still had control of what was going on, which was not to say that I wasn't in an abusive relationship, which I was. So let me start off. It's very easy to get into an abusive relationship, but almost impossible to get out of one. The abuser, when I met my previous girlfriend, and by the way, I want to make it very clear that this video is nothing to do with her, and it's also nothing to do with me. It's purely about helping others out there. That's all this is about. So my relationship started off fantastic. I actually saw her almost every day for the first 2 or 3 weeks. Everything was going great. I really wanted to see her as much as I could because it just worked. It just felt really good, and I just really liked how it made me feel. But I think this is one of the main or first red flags of an abusive relationship, which is that seeing someone every day is not a proud sign, something you should be really promoting and saying, wow, we've seen each other 10 times in the last 12 days. We really like each other. We really fit. Actually, it's quite naive, and you should definitely not see your partner more than 2 or 3 times a week at the start, even once a week, because you really need to understand and think and have time to yourself to identify what red flags there might be, and to see if this person is really right for you, and you're not there because you like someone because they like you, but whether they actually have the right fit, how they are with your friends, how they are in other situations. Really thinking, is this person a good person? Because once you start seeing them every single day, then you basically start wanting to protect them and start ignoring things and start saying, well, I know they do this, but their other qualities are this, that and the other, and it's really okay, when actually it might not be. So I thought I was really lucky to have found someone like this, and we basically had 5 months of dating, I guess, in the first 3 weeks. I had no time to think on my own, and whenever there were issues raised by myself or others, I quickly dismissed them because I really liked her and everything else was going great. I think that's a common thing of abusive relationships. It's really easy to get into them, and the intensity blinds you from the reality. So when people did raise concerns, I would just say yes, but she isn't like that with me. They don't understand because behind closed doors she's totally different, and she's amazing. And you find yourself defending them against other people because you really like this person and you want to protect them and you really care about them. They've essentially become your best friend in a very short period of time, your partner, and you see a future with them. You want a future with them. And I think the secret ingredient my abuser and many abusers have with all of this is they show a lot of love and affection whenever any doubt came into my mind. It would always be, whenever anything was problematic, the next thing, there'd be loads of love and affection and kindness, and you just think, wow, okay, they have this thing, it's really not their problem, their fault, maybe because of their childhood, maybe because of this or that, but they're an amazing person and they really care about me. So our first fight was after about 3 weeks. She was upset about something I said. I remember for about 30 minutes in the car, she would be quizzing me over and over again, but I don't understand why. Why did you do this? Why did you say that? It doesn't make any sense. I just don't get it. I've never been treated like this before. She kept saying that she just didn't understand and kept going over it again and again and again in a car where I couldn't get out. And it was just, the same thing over and over and over again. And whatever I was doing to explain myself, it didn't have any success in calming her down. And I just thought, well, this must be what a fight is like, because I actually had never been in a long-term relationship before, and I don't know. I guess. I knew it was nothing to do with me, but I didn't know how to deal with it. So I just knew it would pass, and it did. And I just resigned to apologising and say it was a misunderstanding, and that's what happened. And as the weeks went on, pretty much every Thursday we would have a fight. She would get upset with something I said or did, and again it would be a long drawn out conversation about why it happened, what happened, the fact she didn't understand it, and then I guess after a few months I sort of got used to this, and I knew it was nothing to do with me, and I'd hoped that over time these fights would disappear as she'd become more comfortable, and I realised, as much as I spent time with her, it was sometimes getting a bit too much for me, and I remember at one point saying, well, look, I'll give it a few more months, and because I really like her, really want it to work, and if it doesn't fix itself by then I'll just have to end it. And as soon as I gave myself that deadline, I don't really know how or what happened, but the good times would always return, and she would be really nice and really loving and really caring. We'd have a lot of fun, and she also went to therapy, where she talked these issues out with her therapist and came back and seemed much happier, and it seemed like she was improving herself, and I think because of the therapy that she was having, I felt more comfortable to keep working at what we had, because I wanted to keep the good times and to maximize those and reduce the bad times. So after about 5 months, we moved in together, and the weekly arguments became twice a week, and actually towards the end was almost every day. Every argument we had was behind closed doors. She never wanted anyone to ever hear us. It would always be like in cars, or when no one was around. She loved having an argument in a car, and particularly on a long journey. I remember in London, we went there and we drove about 3 hours south, and she started an argument as soon as we left the house, and it continued on actually almost throughout the day, to which point on that day itself I was almost saying, look, if this continues, we need to end this. And basically, I think the reason why it was behind closed doors was to keep the illusion with everyone that everything was going great, and whoever I would speak to, they would say, well, you'd seem like the perfect couple, and my friends and family, well, not my friends for sure, thought everything was fantastic, and little did they know. And we would go to her therapist together, and I would go to mine, and as soon as things got really bad, and I was on the verge of ending it, every time things just kept getting better again. And I remember like several times over those 2 years, maybe 4 or 5 times, I said, well, once we get to June, if it's still not good, I'll end it. When I got to June, in August, I would say, well, once I get to November, if it doesn't improve, I'll end it. And it sort of went on like that until I remember one point I stopped saying that. And I think that's really when I, in retrospect, I realised I was stuck. I was stuck in it and I couldn't get out. I didn't know how to. So it started off with simple arguments, and then it would transition into many types of psychological and emotional abuse. It would start with her telling me which of my friends she didn't like, and therefore which ones we didn't like, because if she was treated badly by my friends, then I shouldn't be friends with that person, or if she would assassinate their characters and say, well, they're not real, and they do this and they do that, and they don't treat you well, or they're meant to be your best friend, but they do this, and basically planting a lot of doubt in my mind over a period of time, to which point I would sort of never really know what were my thoughts and what were hers, because I think when I was living with her, and I was living with her for quite some time, the intensity of that and her planting things in my head all the time, and then conditioning me with all the arguments, basically stopped me having my own thoughts, and I would ultimately do whatever I could to keep her happy. She banned me from seeing any girls, friends that were girls, even if I'd known them for 10 years, and tell me it was completely inappropriate, and that she's never been treated that way by anyone before, and it's completely wrong. And she basically gave me permission to see 2 friends that were girls. And I think that basic behaviour is stopping you from seeing people, planting those ideas into your head. It's basically aimed at isolation. She didn't really have that many friends, and those that she did during the relationship, they all ended, all of those friendships, or at least most of them did. And I actually felt bad for her, and I wanted to encourage her and help her, and when I went out on my own to see my friends, I guess I stopped seeing them because of what she was saying, and also my feeling towards her. So anyway, I was slowly being isolated. She would use a lot of phrases like, "I don't understand why you're doing this. I don't understand you. I know what I'm worth. I deserve better than this. I've never been treated so badly like this by anyone before. I feel so humiliated. You're such a liar. If you ever say that again, I'm leaving. If you ever do this again, I'm leaving. I can't be in a relationship where the guy treats me like this or says things like this. It's disgusting. You must promise me that you'll never ever do this again." And so on. And she'd get really upset, really angry. She would just be unable to control her emotions, her thoughts, her feelings during these really strong episodes that she would have. And in fact, during the second year of our relationship, she actually threatened to leave almost every week for about 2 months. And I would have to calm her down. And it's funny because I think I did it because I wanted her to stay, and because, I don't know, deep down maybe it had something to do with my childhood or something like this, where when you calmed her down and she showed that love and attention, it felt like I was doing something right again, and I'd be being rewarded, and I guess I just wanted to be loved, and I just didn't want someone to be so upset, so angry because of something that I was perceived to have done. And again, I would go back to all the good things that she did and who she was, and all the love and the care. But I guess ultimately that wasn't really real, and it just kept me stuck. So I would often say it was a misunderstanding, and I loved her and I cared about her, and it's okay, and she's okay, and I read a lot about shame and guilt, and it said that you need to just be compassionate, and it just say, it's not your fault, and you're totally okay, and everything's okay. And I wanted to help her. I deeply cared about her, and I didn't want her to suffer. During my relationship, my abuser spoke a lot about shame, feelings of shame, that she was a bad person, and often playing the victim. I was always reassuring her, telling her she was an amazing person, everything was okay. I actually never understood what shame was before I met her. I never felt it before. I had no idea. It was kind of a word, but it didn't mean anything to me. But I have to say that during that relationship, particularly in the last 6 months, I never felt so much shame in all of my life. Let me explain what shame is. It's, for me, it started off as guilt that I'd done something wrong. I mean, that was easy because she would often tell me all the time all the things I did wrong, and that she'd never been treated like that before. And shame is when you're moving from guilt, when you do something wrong, to actually you being a bad person. And I often that sort of developed after about 3 or 4 months of feeling intense guilt. I felt huge shame that I was such a horrible bad person. That everything I did was terrible and was wrong, and she deserved to be with someone better than me. And I genuinely thought I was a terrible person. Everything I was doing was upsetting my abuser, and how could I do that to someone that I loved and wanted to be with? You see, as abusive relationships develop, they start showing themselves after several months. You never go into a relationship and sort of see, oh, it's an abusive relationship, I need to leave. It's never like that. It's always red flags, and then they become more and more, and the abuser really shows themselves after quite a period of time, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. But once it starts, it will then gather speed, very slowly at start, and then it will just get worse and worse and worse, and actually towards the end it will be almost impossible, if you're lucky enough to get to an ending point that I did. So for me, it developed into verbal abuse, where something I said or did would upset her, leaving her to tell me I was a disgusting man, and an onslaught of other insulting language. The frequent arguments, and at its peak in the last 3 months, I genuinely had no idea who I was waking up to. I didn't know if she was going to be angry at me that morning or that day. Anything I would say, she would just switch. I just had no idea. I had no idea anything could set her off. And it was, as a result, I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't want to make her upset. I didn't want to be in that situation, and so I did whatever I could to keep her happy, so that I wouldn't suffer. Yeah, when she was mad at me, she'd be mad for several days. She would say, "Don't touch me, leave me alone." She would, if I'd leave the house to go for a walk, she'd say why. If I left to leave an argument, she would say why. She would say, "You need to sort this out. You need to stay here if you love me. You need to fix this. We need to work this out. Don't leave." If I would eventually go, she would then come find me 20 minutes later. She would always make sure I wouldn't get too far, she'd protect herself by making sure I wouldn't talk to people. She would tell me that I shouldn't be talking to people, that I shouldn't be saying anything to my family, because they would all hate me, or hate her rather, and that I should keep everything to myself. Again, coming back to that isolation and creating this reality, and also stopping me from really getting out of it, and processing my own thoughts about it, realizing what was going on. I think then there was the manipulation. When I chose, at some point my friend recommended I go to see a therapist, to talk about what was going on in the relationship. When I chose my therapist, and I told my girlfriend, she was furious at me because I didn't choose her therapist, or a therapist that she would recommend, and I chose my own therapist, and she said it should be a joint decision, and it was something that we should do together, and not that I should do. And then even when I was going to the therapy, the first thing my therapist said was, "Look, you need to keep this between you and I, all of these sessions, just try that." And I remember coming back, and me and my girlfriend went out for, my abuser went out for pizza, and she would ask me, "How did it go? What happened?" And I explained that, my therapist said that maybe the conversations were, I had to approach it very delicately, and I said, "Look, we didn't really say that much. It was very early stages, and then as the weeks went on, it became clear that, to my abuser, that I couldn't tell her, and she got furious about that. Why can't you tell me? You should be telling me." She tells me everything that happens with her therapist, not that I ask, but she says, or if I ask, she tells me. She was hugely upset that I wouldn't tell her, and that reason is because she needed to protect the relationship and protect the fact that I couldn't find out almost what was going on, and actually about 6 weeks more down the line, she would say that when she gets back to a therapist, she feels much stronger about the relationship. But when I come back from mine, I feel very unsure about the relationship, and therefore, if I really want the relationship to work, I need to stop seeing my therapist. And so I did, because I agreed with her. That when I came back, I was thinking less about the relationship and uncertain about it. And if I really wanted it to work and I really wanted to try, I needed to stop seeing her. So that's what I did. My abuser cut me off from talking about it, like I said, with my friends and family. She would insist that no one needs to know our business. My family would hate her if they listened to me about all the issues that we had. And as a result, my relationship with my family became strained. Whenever they would call, I would always find it very, very difficult to talk to them while my ex-girlfriend, my abuser, was in the room. I'd almost have to call them back. Or I remember at one point when my sister asked me a question, I would look at my abuser almost to see if I could answer that question before answering it. I was unable to speak freely with them, and many of my friends didn't know what was going on, because whenever we went out with my abuser, with my ex-girlfriend, they just saw her as fun and happy and the light of the party and someone that could talk to everyone in the room, and they all loved her. And I always remember when I used to go out with her, I just thought, wow, why do they all get the fun and the happy, girlfriend, and I get this? I just didn't understand it. So I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, well, why did I continue? Surely any sane person would have stopped, would have given up, would have. I don't know, that would have just said that enough is enough. And I think the truth is, you never fully understand it unless you're really in it. When you truly care about someone and you think that they truly care about you, you just want to protect them. And you just, when she was going through the therapy and things were being solved, I just thought, well, we'll get there. It may take time, but we'll get there. And she's such an amazing person, the other side of it. She's so loving, she's caring, she's so fun, everyone loves her. That, if I'm just a little bit more patient, then this could be the most perfect girlfriend ever, and it would be worth the effort. Little did I know that it's not my job to fix her, and there's no guarantee that she will ever be fixed. And I suppose when you live with someone 24/7 and they feed all these thoughts and ideas into your head, and basically break down all the time, I just wanted to help her, and basically try not to take what was coming to me to heart, and just think, I just always thought, well, it's her that has the problem, I know this, and I'm just going to try and help her. And I was very easily able to separate that. And while I was thinking, while I can still do that, I'm totally fine and I'm safe and I'm in control and I know what I'm doing and I'm not letting it affect me. Occasionally it would, and I'd get really upset, but most of the time I was able to separate myself and stay calm. And I suppose as the months progressed, it was like a leaking bucket. While she was solving some issues, new issues would come up. She would I was obviously told that all these issues were my issues and that they'd existed for a long time. And throughout our relationship, even though they'd never been brought up before in the first year, they were always there. And I was forced to agree that it was me that was causing this. First I was told I had an issue with money. despite that I was paying for bills and rent and holidays and going out. Whenever I questioned anything or said, oh, I'm not sure if I can afford this, or if this is the right thing to spend money on, she would get really upset with me and say that I was the one that had an issue with the money, and she'd never been treated like this before by any previous boyfriends, and they never had issues with money, and why do I, even though I was paying for everything. Basically, as soon as I set a date in my head when it got too much for me to leave, she would understand that. I'm not sure how, but she always knew when I was getting to the end. And basically all the love and affection returned. And soon enough, I'd lost myself. I stopped playing sports, I stopped seeing my friends, I stopped talking to my family so much, I stopped doing the things that I liked doing. And started being more reclusive and staying home and obviously spending more time with her, which made it cyclical. I got a bit fatter. I lost motivation for a lot of things, and through it all, the abuser got worse and worse as the weeks and months passed. And I became trapped. She would often say, whenever I questioned anything, she would say, well, look how much I do for you, and how did you survive without me? What do you? And she'd ask, what do you do for me? And even though I would say things, she would say, no, you do that for yourself. What do you do for me? She would say that she does everything for me. She would say that I no longer know how to do things on my own. There were times when I needed to do certain things, and I genuinely started to believe that I couldn't do it on my own, and it actually kept me in the relationship, because I was thinking, well, if we break up, how will I survive? How will I take care of this or that or the other? And I need her, and she would program this into my head to stop me leaving. She would say how lucky I was that she was here. And while I knew at the start a lot of it didn't make any sense, it all added up, and slowly I started to believe in it. And I at some point, I just found it very difficult to break up with her. I would fear I would never find anyone again. And in my head, it was easier to try and fix the issues than to break up. She was such a loving and caring and all those amazing things when she was great. And I'd put in so much effort and suffered so much pain that I was willing to. It was easier for me to keep going than to end it. She would often tell me that whenever I questioned anything, she would tell me I had no idea what it was like to really be in a relationship, since the relationships I'd been in were only 6 months, and this was now over a year or a year and a half, and she would say, well, you don't know, and this is how she's never been treated like this before, and this isn't correct behaviour from me, and I just wouldn't know. She I guess changed my reality or made me question myself a lot. And she would say that she was often walking on eggshells with me, and she couldn't take it, and it was very confusing for me, because that's exactly how I felt with her. That I didn't know when she was going to get upset and what she was going to do, and what might cause her to be angry with me. And whenever we had those arguments, they would go on for hours and hours and hours. So eventually I stopped my therapy because my abuser said that it was pushing us away from each other, and that if I really wanted to solve the issues we had, I needed to stop seeing my therapist, because every time I come back from my therapy, I'm doubting the relationship. Then the manipulation ranked up. Sensing I couldn't continue, she would tell me that all of her ex-boyfriends, whenever they broke up with her, they all begged her to come back. They all realised that she was the best thing in their lives, and they made a terrible mistake. And she would say to me that when it finishes, and there's no going back. there's no breakups. Like, breakups are final. There's no timeouts, and that their mothers would come to her and say, "Oh, I wish my son had, got married to you and not the girl that he got married to, and they really regret that she's not in their family anymore." And basically all these mind games making me feel that I couldn't lose this person, and I needed to appreciate this person more, and not give up. And on that note, she would say that I was the strongest person in the relationship, and I needed to make sure that we stay together, and I needed to keep us together, and if it was just her, we would have broken up a long time ago, and I needed to be strong and for both of us, because we love each other, and I needed to promise her that we wouldn't break up and that I would be strong. And so that's what I did. And during all the arguments and the abusive comments towards me, I would often say, why are you being so cruel? Why are you being so tough on me? And she would say to me that you need someone tough. You need someone in your life that's like this. That's what you need, and that's what she's giving me. And it would make me deeply upset. And it wasn't until 2 years later, when we went on a long holiday, that I actually found myself unable to speak at all. I remember just before we went away, her therapist told me that in order for me to be happy, I needed to keep her happy as much as possible, and then I can get my happiness from that. And so it became clear that in order for her to not be upset with me, I just needed to not say anything, and then she had no reason to get upset with me. And so that's what I did, and I completely lost myself, and didn't say anything, and anything that she would talk to me, I could barely answer, because I was just fearing that everything would just get misunderstood and directed at me in anger. I guess sensing this, she just kept pushing me why I was not talking, why I couldn't have these conversations. And I eventually just said, look, I'm really sorry, but unless we solve these issues, I can't get married to her. And she got really upset, really angry, and we actually broke up that night. Although it was a phrase that I'd used a few times before, it really threw her that night. The following morning we agreed to go our own ways, and I remember sitting over breakfast, and she asked me if I had anything to say, and I just said, no, look, I think you're right, and we should go our own ways. And she sort of knew what she needed to do, and that was just to keep me in the conversation, and make her the victim as much as possible. Even when that night when we were sleeping, she would sleep on the floor, and I tried to give her the blanket and encourage her that I would sleep on the floor, but she wanted to be the victim. She would throw the blanket off, say, why are you doing this to me? I can't believe you're behaving like this. And it would make me feel very guilty, and then turn to shame that I was a bad person, and all of that guilt and all of that shame just came all together after she kept keeping me in conversations, to which point I eventually felt bad about us breaking up and her going our separate way, that that I said it was all my fault and I had the issues, and then we got back together again. And then what she made me do after that was to call her sister and tell her sister. She just gave me the phone to call my sister. So I called her sister and she said, and I was like, I don't know, what am I saying to her? And she said, tell her that it's you that's the problem. So that's what I did, and I explained that I had the issues, and when I get home I'm going to work on them and it's my fault. Then she made me call her therapist and say the same thing. And then after that she made me call my mum and tell her the same thing. And while I was on the phone to my mum, she wrote down exactly what I needed to say. And when I was reading it, I just couldn't bring myself to say it. So I said other words along similar lines. And after the conversation ended, she got furious at me that I changed the script. And she was so mad. So 3 days later, she broke up with me again, and I realised in that moment exactly what was going on. I realised that I had become her as a child and she had become her mother. This love-hate relationship that we had, all of the love and then all of the hate that came after. I was living in her childhood. And I realised that I couldn't solve it and I couldn't live like this, and this was just going to be ongoing. And so when she broke up with me, I had nothing else to say. And so we came back home, and I packed up all of her stuff, and she took it within the next day. And I just needed her out of my life immediately. And then over the next few weeks, it quickly dawned on me that I was in an abusive relationship, and I had no idea. I had no idea because I didn't know abuse could happen to men. I had no idea that abuse was not just physical but emotional and psychological. And the truth is that anyone can get into an abusive relationship. Doesn't matter how smart you are, what your background is, what your education is, how strong you are, how mentally strong you are, how positive you are. Doesn't matter any of this. If the person, shows you lots of love and affection and brings you in to a relationship and then slowly starts to change, and you want to protect this person, you become stuck in it, and there is no way out. For me, the only way out was that she would end it, and that's eventually luckily what happened. And actually, when I saw my therapist afterwards, she said to me that she was amazed from where I was that I was able to get out of it, because most people at that point never leave. And while and actually it took 2 times for me to get out of it. And while relationships are not always good times, there certainly shouldn't be bad times all the time, and there shouldn't be fighting all the time, and there shouldn't be they should be exciting, and they shouldn't, and seeing someone all the time is not a sign of success at the start of the relationship. It's the sign of naivety. You need time to yourself. You need time to process. Any manipulation, any red flags, any isolation behaviour, any hateful words directed at you, them playing the victim all the time, blaming others all the time, any controlling behaviour. This is clear signs of an abusive relationship. Make sure to ask a lot of questions at the start, to find out about previous relationships, to ask your friends to meet them as early as possible, and find the friend that's the most honest and ask them what they really think. Them protecting you and saying that they think she's great when really they don't isn't protecting you. It's setting you up for a lot of trauma going on. If you have friends and you really think there are red flags, tell them. Be nice about it. Give them examples. Just I mean, the fear is you don't want to lose that friendship, but You have to do it carefully and subtly, and maybe seek professional help yourself to see how you can help them. My abuser started, look at their friendship group, see how they are with their friends. My abuser, started off with a few friends and then lost pretty much them all during the relationship. So always be aware, always try and understand, always think, so always pay attention to those red flags, take time to yourself. My abuser knew all along who she was. She knew exactly how to keep me trapped all the time, with the love, with the affection. She knew my weak points, and preyed on them. My compassion and wanting to help her, she would feed on that, and stick to that. And she would often say, when things got too much, she would just say, "I will set you free." And I really didn't understand what that meant at the time. I thought it was that that she just wanted to quit. But I didn't realise that I was the one imprisoned, and I was the one that needed to be freed. I was like a trapped animal, and I had no idea what it really meant. All I wanted to do was help her to overcome her issues and her problems and her behaviour, because if we kept only the good times, it could be the best relationship ever. But it wasn't for me to fix her, and there was no guarantee this behaviour could be fixed. It could take years, decades, or stay forever, and there's no reason for me to stay in that relationship for that. So be aware. Stop the relationship before it comes too late. If you'll set yourself timelines, then that's already a huge problem, and maybe you should just end it right at that point. You don't want to get into a cycle of good times, bad times, good times, bad times. As soon as you almost get to the end, they bring you back. It doesn't sound good. Try and separate yourself from the situation. Talk to friends, talk to family. If they're stopping you, again, it's a big red flag. Seek professional help and support. I was on the verge of not getting out and it ruining my life. I want this video to help raise awareness, to stop others and save other men that may suffer from this. Be kind. Be with someone that makes you happy, that makes you want to marry them, that makes you feel like you're becoming a better person. I was terrified of getting married to her. As I say these things, I still stayed in that relationship. It's incredible. After all this and saying it, I was still in it, and I knew. As for me, I have no regrets about the relationship. I am happier now than I ever been. I'm more grateful now about things. I've learned so much about myself, and about relationships, and about what I want in relationships. And it's really about arming yourself with tools. This video is about arming yourself with tools as to how to recognise, identify, and help others that may be in abusive relationships. Yesterday, today, or even tomorrow. Even if you're not in one, you've never been in one, this will help you to understand what one is. Again, this video has nothing to do with my abuser or me, but just purely to raise awareness, to help someone out there. Thank you.